Good to see that so many people have taken time off to be with us today. We're doing some training on the new release module, and I will just say some small words here before I hand over to my dear friend and colleague Santos. We at Inuit, we are the hosts of this webinar, or not webinar, it's actually a training. And it will be recorded, of course. You probably will get a link early tomorrow. Feel free to send it across in your organization. It will also be available at our website, inuit.se, of course. Please, if you haven't noticed, that we are having a webinar series called News and Tips and Tricks for ServiceDesk. It's a series, so we kind of keep continuing all the episodes. If you haven't signed up for that, please do that. It's on our website too. Yeah, that was pretty much it. They're still popping in people, but I hand over to you, Santos. Please introduce yourself and go forward with the training.
Thank you so much, Eric. Hi, everyone. Good day. Welcome to our today's webinar on Introduction to Release Management in ServiceDesk Plus. I'm Santosh Maiban, Customer Success Manager from Manage Engine ServiceDesk. I hope you're all doing good and staying safe during this pandemic situation. And we're all waiting for things to ease out a bit so we could meet each other in person and get a lot more of this education happening in Sweden and in other part of the world as well. So with no further delay, I'm going to get right into our today's webinar for the release management. So just so you all know that we have released the release management in version 12.0 of ServiceDesk Plus. And since you are customers of ServiceDesk, or if you're going to use ServiceDesk Plus, just a heads up, make sure you stay updated in our latest version, as we have introduced a lot of features. And as Eric mentioned, there's always a training or a session on tips and tricks and what's new about ServiceDesk, which is also informative. And to be honest, that's the sweetest session. So that's going to be a lot more informative for you all. So in today's agenda, the main idea behind this session is about understanding the purpose of release management, what benefit it offers for the organization. Since release has difference between change and the project, we are going to make sure how the distinction works and how does the release management impact the other IT service management concepts, and what are the ways a release could happen. This is something that's important, and also the configuration and components that is involved in setting up or blocking all the release components together. So this is our main agenda. Now, with release management in ServiceDesk, multiple ServiceDesk teams can now build multiple release templates with additional fields. You can customize the form and its layout. You can configure roles for release and general roles. Then you can have stages with multiple statuses to control the release flow. Also, all of these components can be effectively put together on a visual workflow builder that we have in ServiceDesk and stitch these elements together on an easy drag and drop canvas. Also, the release management helps in scheduling, planning, controlling, testing, and deploying an agreed and accepted change or project process for an organization. So it is basically about an approved change or a project that has to be deployed will be controlled, planned, scheduled, tested, and deployed using the release management process. What are its benefits for the organization in general? Now, with release, from identifying incidents and applications and infrastructure during release to setting up continuous automated testing, there are numerous ways to improve the release management. Building an effective release management process relies heavily on automation, collaboration, and transparency throughout the entire process flow. So here are a couple of benefits that the organization could get benefited out of using the release management. So this reduces the bottleneck by involving multiple teams within a release that you're working on. It shortens the feedback loops by consistently engaging and enabling collaboration between multiple teams involved in the release, because you need to have them on board the release rather than email conversations or with meetings where people are like left out or people are like overseen and not being part of the release management process. You can implement testing throughout the entire release process, making sure that each and every stage of your release is thoroughly tested and approved. Automate the release process through workflows that we have in the system using the visual workflow builder. You can use components like notifications and approvals and ensure transparency throughout each and every step of the release. Audit the release through a post-review process, looking into blind spots, downtime, unaudited changes, or any factors that stood as a roadblock for the release process. So this is about the benefits of the release management process. We are now going to understand how does this release management process vary from the change management process. Like when you look into the change, its primary objective is to enable beneficial changes to be made with the minimum disruption to your IT service. There could be disruptions or downtimes, but it's minimum. Whereas if you look into the release management is like an air traffic controlling process where the changes are bundled together into a single release to reduce downtime and inconvenience to the rest of the business. So the basic objective of release management is to ensure the integrity of the live environment is protected at all times. So here are a couple of examples that we have seen for release management process, such as service installations, changes to your service level agreements, routine modifications, patch deployments, and changes to infrastructure components that are part of or examples of your release management process. What are the ways the release is getting triggered? Two ways. When an IT change request is approved and ready for implementation, the implementation is further planned and processed using the release management process, which is controlled by the members of change board to ensure a successful release. And again, multiple changes can be gathered together into a single release, and at the implementation or deployment of the release, if you figure out a new issue, you can again raise a change and tag it to this particular release. Also, when the project teams plan a project with defined deadlines, resources, tasks, and other elements, it is the release team that works very closely with the technical team, product managers, external and internal stakeholders, along with the critical function to coordinate a release as defined in the project. So these are like two different functions that would constitute towards a release management activity for an organization. Now, we're going to discuss what are the components that is required to set up an effective release management process. And with the new release management process, users can now use multiple configurations to set up an end-to-end release activity. Now, with no further delay, what I'm going to do now is going to take you right into the demo where we are going to see the components that is used to set up a release activity and take you through an example of how the ServiceDesk team functions through the change and release management process when it comes to a feature enhancement activity. All right, so we plan multiple change activities for feature enhancements, and these activities are grouped together into a single release and we ship them across. So let's get into our demo right away and start working on it. Now, what you're looking at is the IT Help Desk, and I'm at the Enterprise Edition. Release management is available in the Professional Edition as well as an add-on, and in the Enterprise Edition, it's part of the ITIL suite. So if you look into the release management process as a requester or as a technician, if the requester is allowed to take part in a specific stage of the release, the requester will also be able to see that specific stage and perform the specific operation. Likewise, for technicians, they will have access to the release based on the roles and permissions required. They'll be able to control, manage, and operate through different stages of the release. Well, if you look into the release segment, it starts from the submission stage with different tabs and buttons that I would say. You can track the roles that is part of the release, any associations that has been mapped to the release. We have them in a separate tab, tasks, reminders, work logs. So this kind of looks like the change management process that we already have in place. Now, we have seen the larger picture of how a release is created And also, if you look into the workflow that is mapped to the release, it is nested, looped between stages, conditions, approvals, notifications, and so on. So we have now seen how the larger picture of the release looks like. And also, when we are at the list view of releases, we can literally control how we need the release to be shown between a calendar view, between a table view, and a tabular view. So this is our quick overview of the release management process. And to build something like this, we are first going to see the admin configurations that is required. Now, the first configuration that we're going to look at is under admin. We have release templates. So you can have multiple templates, and also you could like just use one template with different workflows mapped to it. Now, as you could look into the template by default have a lot of fields. We have different sections that you could introduce into the template. And each of these sections can have its own customizations, color properties, font, and style properties. You can also have it for the entire form as well. Also, you can add a lot of these additional fields. And also, you could like go ahead and search for the additional fields. You could just click on add, and you have options to add the columns, the layouts, how we wanted to like fix it. As you can see, we have flexible column length 4, column 3, 2, and 1. So this is something like a flexible column or a single column. And again, each of these entities can be customized as how you require. We have radio buttons, checkboxes, multi-select, decimal, multi-line, single line. There are like different additional fields that you could make use of. We have roles. We have critical roles, which is part of the release, and we have other roles that you could make use of. Also, you could just add a role right from the template. You can drag and drop the columns, which is basically for layout, and you can add a row just by dragging and dropping it right into the screen. Now, while you are configuring a template, we saw how you could add sections and additional fields. We're now seeing how we could add roles with sections and new roles. You can basically create a role for all users, which is basically for end users and technicians. If that's role is only for the site technicians or associated site and group technicians on each release, you can choose accordingly. And as you can see over here, for each of these release roles, you can choose what operation the user has to do on that specific release. If you want them to view, edit, and approve, you can basically do that. So this way, whoever has been mapped to the specific role, they'll be able to view, edit, and approve the particular release. So this is how the roles are added into the system. And once added, the template is saved. Now, this template is being marked as a general template or an emergency template, which basically acts as a filter when someone is trying to create a release. So when you are creating a release, you just click on new release, and you would just use the filters. So when you're creating it, it just sorts general and emergency templates. So that's the purpose of this field. And we have workflows that's mapped to a release template. So the moment I'm going to choose the template as feature announcement, the workflow has changed accordingly. So what goes right inside the workflow? Let's take a look at the release workflow. So I go to admin and I go to release workflow. Now, here is a release workflow that I've created, replicating how the ServiceDesk release activity is being processed. So we have submission, planning, testing, deployment, then we have closure stage, all right? So each of these stages have a lot of conditions and approval. So from submission, we have conditions, we have approvals, then we have options to like send out notifications. There's a lot more of these operations that we have. And this is just a preview of the workflow that we have deployed based on how the ServiceDesk team operates. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to click on your workflow and show you a canvas of how the workflow canvas looks and how you could go ahead and create an effective workflow. Now, this is what I basically do. To even begin creating the workflow, I would like plan it on a piece of paper, and then I would like go ahead to the canvas and try to replicate it. I shorten the loops so that enlarge the canvas so that I have enough space to work on it. So to add the stages, all right, I can just drag and drop the stages right into the canvas. So we have fixed stages from submission, planning, deployment, testing, UAT, development, testing, UAT, deployment, training, and review. So these are fixed stages, and each of these stages can have as much as statuses that is required. And where do you create the stage and statuses? So if I'm choosing planning, I can add as much as statuses I want. So I choose planning, I choose approved, in progress. So I can start choosing as much as statuses I want. And where do I create these stage and statuses? So I do them under the admin tab. So let's go to the admin tab, and I have stage and status. So release stage and statuses. So as I said, the stages are fixed, and under each stages, I can add new release statuses. I can define a name, and I can like choose the type of this particular status. So is it a successful status, or is it canceled? Is it the approval pending status? Just to denote like what type of status this is. Then roles to notify. I can choose between like different release roles over here. All right, so this way I can use them for notification, and based on the type of role, if it's for all users or if it's for technicians, and based on how many members have been added into that particular role, the notification goes out accordingly, and you can draw your notification content with subject and message. So basically on each of these subject and message, you just hit the dollar symbol, and it brings all the release values, whatever values that's there on the release template, it brings all of them. So this would help you to customize your notification template with the release values for each and every status that you define in the system. So this is how you create multiple stage and status. And that is exactly what I'm using in my release workflow. I just need to drag and drop the node into the canvas and map accordingly. So from requested, or even from like, so once the submission is accepted, I can just go ahead and connect it to like in progress in planning stage. So this is something I could just add in, drag and drop. The next is going to be condition. So condition is nothing but I can check for different values. So as you can see over here, we have additional field data over here. Then we have data from different segments of the release and other additional information. So based on multiple values, so say for instance, if I want to choose category, and based on the category, I wanted to perform a decision. So I just add a condition, and right from the stage, I can put it to the input node. And if the category is application for this particular release, then I can move it from yes to the next stage. If it's not for application, I can then drag it to the planning stage approval node and say it is approved. And once it's approved, I can drag it to the next stage. So this way, using conditions, I can basically verify the data and route the release between different stages. And also, if I need to perform other operations, I can do so. Now, after condition, if I wanted to like perform switch operations, I can literally do so. So what I could do is I could use any fields from the release. So say for instance, if the release is between like different groups, I wanted to delegate multiple approvals. So I can just choose the switch. So what I'm basically doing over here is that once it's approved, I'm directing the decision to my switch. And based on the group that is set on the release, I can choose how many levels of approval is required, or if I need to send out notifications, I can do that. So it basically gives me an option to perform a single input and multiple decision outputs. So this way, based on the value of the release, I can delegate my approval or notification accordingly. And if you ask me, approval would be a lot more apt operation at this point. So based on the group of the release, I can delegate my approval to 1, 2, or more level of approvals for that particular release. While you're defining the approval process, it's quite easy. you define the name of the approval and you choose wait for. So wait for is kind of important. What happens is that wait for defines anyone to approve. So for each of the approval level, how many ever approvers have approved, any one of them have to approve in order for the approval to move to the next level. Everyone to approve, everyone of that particular approval level have to approve in order for the release to move, the approval to move to the next level. And anyone to approve, the first response action. So whatever decision it is, if it's approval or rejection, whichever is the first operation, that will be considered and the approval moves to the next level. Now, who can you choose as approvers? So we have organizational roles, we have CAB members from the change, we have release roles that you could choose as approvers. So we are giving a vast range of choices that you could choose from the approval list. Then the subject and the message is the same content as how we had it for the status notification. Choose $symbol, it brings the details on the content from the release, and you can choose them on the subject and message. So this data from the release would be taken along with the notification for the users, which would help them understand or have more information about what this release is all about. So this is about approval. And again, notification. So you could basically configure notifications on your release workflow. So you could like add a new notification template. You can give this a name. You can say like application announcements. And you can say who needs to be notified. You want the organizational roles, CAB members to be notified, or release roles. You can basically choose who needs to be notified. All right. So we have different choices. And again, even for notifications, the $sign is one key feature that we have implemented based on a lot of customer requirements. So this way, like you could take the value right from the release to the users with more accurate data. All right, so this is about the notification. Then field update. So when a release is about to be completed or when the release is about to be moving from one stage to the other, you want to make changes to the field, you can like do so. Just give it a name. You say what field has to be updated, and you can click on save. So exactly when the release goes through the field update process, based on whatever field and value that has to be updated, it will take action accordingly. So this is how you build the release workflow using the components that we have, and a full-scale completed workflow will be as we are going to see right now. So this is a workflow that we have created, so which involves conditions, approval, and traversing between different teams. So since this is just a release process, we basically have not included approval over here, because whatever components that you just saw, all right, whatever components that you just saw, which is like the canvas, the approvals, field updates, switch operations, notifications, and conditions, it's the same when we have the change management workflow. So since our process involves like multiple changes to be clubbed together into a single release, for the change management, so our announcement tickets always begins with the change ticket. And here is the workflow that we have for announcement process. So from the submission stage, it goes to condition. We have 2 levels of approval. So once the submission stage is cleared and processed, it moves to the planning stage. So from planning under design and implementation, it sends out an approval. And based on the approval that is secured, it goes for verifying API or UI, like designing. Then again, for each of these verification that has to be completed, we send it through an approval, and once that is approved, then we move to the approved stage and proceed accordingly. If this is not required, we move to the next stage for other verifications under planning and design. Now, just as how we do that for planning and design, when it comes to evaluation or implementation, there's like a lot of these stages, and these stages have notifications, approvals, and conditions. So this is again a sequential loop. So based on the conditions value, we move to approval stage, and once it is approved, it goes for approved state, approved status, or if not, it goes to the next condition. So this is something we have done for evaluation or implementation. Likewise, as we proceed further, we have review, close, and the review has also been sent through the approval process just to make sure like the review verification reaches multiple eyes, just to make sure everything is clear, and then it moves further. So this change workflow is what we use for the release activities. So the changes are approved, reviewed. So as you could see, it goes through a rigorous set of evaluation. And as and when this is completed, these changes are what is grouped together in a release, and the release is created. So that's what you could see in the association segment, that each of these changes are for different operation, and that has been clubbed into a single release. All right. Now, we've seen the components such as stage and status, workflow, the release template. We have seen how the visual workflow builder helps you to drag and drop the elements right into the canvas and build an entire release workflow. And this is the workflow that is being mapped to a release template. Now, the other components that we just need to take a quick look at is the downtime types. So what we offer is that in the planning stage of the release, you could basically add different downtimes by choosing the type of downtime that you have added. So I can say we have like multiple downtimes. I could choose what it is. I can say enhancement process. I could choose what are the services that is going to be affected because of the downtime. I can also choose the CIs that we have in the CMDB. So if you want to use release effectively, just make sure your CIs are added, so that way you could use it. And it asks for the schedule start and the schedule end time of this particular downtime, and I've added. So what I've added in my planning stage is what we just did, and it has the schedule start and the schedule end date. All right. So this is what you could do with the downtime types when you're configuring it on your release planning stage. Now, with all the data set that we saw, the templates and the workflow, that is what we have put together, and we have created a new release. So to create a new release, you go to the release tab, you do new, you choose the template, it brings in the workflow, it has all these fields with different segments. All right, you manage the roles accordingly, and as I said, there will be certain roles which is just a single drop down, and there would be certain roles where you could involve more than one people. All right, so that is how the release roles work. And we saw where we could create it. We can create this under the admin tab. All right, or you can also create this on the template when you're constructing a new template. Now, here is an important update that you need to know. Now, release manager. So who can be a release manager and what can they do? So the release managers are one of the people who could like approve the release. All right. And also, how do you set someone as release managers is by mapping their roles. So I'm just going to open the admin in a new tab. So I go right into my user profile for technicians, and I can edit a technician's profile. And when I edit it, I have this option that's called roles. And I need to make sure I have the SD release manager role mapped to my profile. Only then my name will be listed on the release form in order for me to be part of that particular release as a release manager. So whoever has this SD release manager role in the admin, technicians, and roles, they will be able to go ahead and take decision on that particular release. Now, we have seen a lot of these components, all right? Downtime types, roles, additional fields, stage and statuses, templates, and workflows. Now, we've also seen how we could stitch together a complete release just by choosing the corresponding template that we created and the workflow that is packed with that particular template. And again, when you're creating a release or once you've created a release, you can edit it and change the workflow how it's required. And as you can see, you can choose the services affected, the assets involved, and CIs involved. So the CI could be part of the CI would be part of the CMDB's database. You can choose the services that are being impacted, the assets that are being impacted, all right? And then all the CI entities that's been added, we can also track what other CIs that will be impacted by this particular release. Fill out the rest of the information, make sure the roles are mapped, and click on Save. The moment you do that, a new release will be created, and the data from the template, the configurations that we have done, will be transferred over here. And also, when I just go right into the release, as I said before, each and every stage has to be verified as per the workflow. Now, if I'm a technician and I got stuck in between not knowing what to do, I can just go access the workflow right from the application itself, and I can get an idea where the workflow is and what needs to be done in order for it to move to next. So this is one other benefit that I would strongly recommend in managing the release through the visual workflow on the ticket. All right, you get a couple of these actions that you could do. You can like go ahead and print the release form. All right, again, this is an activity that you do in order to track like where is it, what it's done, and again, it gives you a complete detailed history on how the release has been progressing. So you could choose what needs to be sent out for printing. So you have all the details. You can literally choose what you don't want to see on the like release update, and you can manage only the required columns, and you can go ahead and take a printout as well on that. All right, so these are like a couple of features and enhancements that we have. And as I said, the association holds more than one chain. So basically what we do is that each and every feature enhancement, such as like the chat enhancement that we have that as a feature, all right, as a change. Then the dashboard enhancements, the APIs that's required for the dashboard enhancements, we have considered these items as a change entity. And as you could see here, the details, the documentation is all drafted out. And this change goes to rigorous testing approval. And all right, so all the different set of stakeholders will be involved over here. And once they feel that, okay, fine, this release is approved and we need to move to implementation process, you can see the release that is that has this change associated over here, and the vice versa. So this is how the operation works, because when you associate a release to a change to a release or the vice versa, you could view the data from other ends of the modules as well. All right, that's one thing. And again, the services affected and the assets involved in the CMDB also helps you to get more data out of it. All right, so with this, we are seeing that how a change management process, a change request that is being created, tags along with the release management process. And likewise, if you wanted to do project association, you can just go ahead and do the very same over here. So this is exactly how we construct the release management workflow and processes. And with that constructed component, we have seen how we could like create a release, manage and control its every operation that is part of this particular release. Now, the best part of this is also the conversation. So all system notifications and communications will be tracked right into the conversations, and history will have a lot more granular, detailed option on how many times the template was edited, what was changed, what was left as such. All of this can be captured right into the symmetry, like right into the history. And also the approval summary is going to have all the list of approvals and the decisions that's been done in the release management part of ServiceDesk Plus. Now, let's take a quick look. All right, so what are the features we have discussed? The release templates, the release forms. Then we have also discussed about the stage and status, the status notifications, the customizations. All right. Then we've discussed about how to handle the release roles right into the workflow builder, template construction, because there was a separate segment just for the workflow and how the workflow could be how the roles could be like constructed in that workflow. So this is something they could do from the template or from the admin tab. Downtime types, what you add in the planning stage will also be carried right into the implementation stage, where the implementer would get to know what's the allowed downtime of this particular release. All right, so these are all the components that we have discussed. that's the same set of components that's been constituted as a workflow, which in turn is being mapped to a template. So as and when a release is being created, not only is the ticket being created, also it would make sure it has all the details and document that is necessary. So we have taken a complete look on the release management process, the components that is required, how to create the release, what are the triggers for release in detail. So with this, I'm coming to the very end of my presentation. All right. So I'm pretty sure this is a new module which has like a lot of moving components. The important takeaway over here is that you need to understand what goes in as a change and what goes in as a release, why there is a distinction and a difference between this. And as I said before, the important part is that the release consolidates a lot of these changes. Likewise for projects, you can plan the project with your project management team and with your stakeholders and so on. When you want to like implement your project that you have been discussing all the way along, you need to make sure you tag the project as well for the release, so that using the release tools like user acceptance testing or development or deployment, you would be able to work on all these elements and get a concluded or a neat idea on how to proceed further. So this is how you plan, scale, and work on the release management process in ServiceDesk Plus. All right. And a quick recap on the edition. This is released in version 12.0 of ServiceDesk Plus. If you're in the standard and in the professional edition of ServiceDesk, you just need to make sure that you purchase release as an add-on to utilize the release management capabilities and deploy the same in your organization. The other aspect here is that this is a feature that was newly released. It does require a lot of brainstorming, discussion, and implementation. So if you would like us to help you, or if you would like us to like have a discussion, share best practice, and do on, we are more than happy to help you out with the same. All right. We would like share our use cases, our customer experiences, and we would help you to like deploy the critical IT service management process and a workflow perfectly right from the scratch. All right. So with all of this in place, I am now ready to take any questions. So please let me know if you have any questions and I'll be more than happy to help you out.
Amazing. Thank you, Santos. So
thank you so much.
I think you mentioned it a couple of times, but maybe we can try to give more example of what the difference between the change and release. I'm not sure everyone fully understands. If you
sure, we can do that.
No. Yeah.
So again, this is a very thin line on how the ITIL experts like Gartner, Ping, or the large enterprises define the differences between change and the release. All right. So the change management concept is primarily about activity that is going to be implemented in a specific segment. So if you're using SAP solutions, or if you're using a homegrown product, that product would need to have some changes to it based on the security enhancements that's coming up, or based on the advancement in technology. So when you're building up a similar change, because you need the entire board to be ready to agree that those changes are mandatory for the business to function smooth. Now, when you are trying to implement a change, all right, what you basically do is that you draft your entire idea and you say when the schedule needs to happen for that particular change management, change request. Once you get that all sanctioned out, what you basically do is you break the change into like different segments, like you plan or you design the entire change process. You seek approvals just to make sure the planning or the designing that you have done for that particular software upgrade or tool change is valid. The validity is determined based on the budgeting, based on the necessity and need of it, based on the resources that you have and the user area that's going to be impacted. Also, it depends on the time of the year, which does not fall between major holidays or during like a situation where people are on vacation. So all these factors have to be placed forth in the planning and design for it to be approved. Now, once the approval is secured, you are going to evaluate and implement. When you are doing that, because when you're going to do all these kind of little bit of testing and changes, there might be downtimes. There might be like agreed downtimes where the services might not be available for a minute or so, or like for 10 minutes or an hour, because it's kind of a change that you wanted to do. Now, this change, downtime, and implementation would be done on your local servers or on local systems first, and then you would plan for the global updates. Now, when you're doing it on local systems or when you're doing it like on a subset of audience, that still constitutes to downtime, and that needs to be on that change ticket for audit purpose. Now, you do all of this and it's like signed off. So whatever code changes or whatever UI changes or whatever like enhancements that you wanted to do in your solution, it's all done. It's all evaluated, approved, and it's reviewed. Now, this is one set of a change that is ready. Likewise, there will be other parallel changes or change ticket, change request that's been placed forth for the organization to understand and to start working in the same direction. So all these changes goes through the same process as how the normal planned change happens. It goes through all the stages, it goes through all the verification process, and then once the different sectors of the change is ready, it's tested, it's bug fixed, and it's reevaluated, then it goes to the release process. So what happens in the release process is that all these changes will be clubbed into a single release, because all these announcements together is what is going to give you a single output, or it's just like a part of the same type of announcement. So we wanted to release. So during the release, you would basically do extensive testing, you would do trainings, you would do reviews, you do user acceptance testing, you do the deployment of this release. But basically, all you're doing over here is validating back and forth on what's been planned on the change management is what is going to happen in the release, because you cannot deviate from what's planned and the change and being approved and what's going to be released. So that cannot be a possibility. Now, in the release segment, when you are trying to do testing, if there are major issues, outages, you would invariably create a change. So as you can see over here, these are like change tickets. You can associate change tickets that are created in the change management. So you should have a process in the workflow. If something breaks, it has to be there has to be a new change that is being triggered. All right. So we have a lot of scriptings and capabilities that we have to trigger a new change or to create a new change. So it comes back to the change management, because something major that has to be functioning is not working as how it is. Now it comes back to the change management process to again create a change just for that particular segment that slipped out. And these are kind of major enhancements, updates, process and structural changes, which need not have an incident, which need not have a service, but it's something as a necessity to the business. It's a shape changing process that needs to be verified and approved, have to be tested. So it starts with the change all over again. Once the change is approved and it's ready for implementation, it just gets added right into the release for further validation. So again, you will have a workflow based on the approval of the change. You want to like reroute the release, you can do so. So this process that you do in the release, the main agenda over here is to make sure there is no downtime, because all the testing and implementation is something that's carried out in the test server through change management tickets. And what we are just doing in the release is the final update. So this is the major deviation that draws line between the change and the release. In the release, you would make sure a 99.99% of uptime where there is no outage or any planned or unplanned downtime, which is again a hindrance to the service, because that's again handled in change. Now, with that in mind, how about a project? Again, project is something that you lay out a detailed plan on what what has to happen with an agreed set of time. So you would have done all your planning on a project with detailed analysis and who is going to work or implement so and so. You have a detailed breakup at the project level. So that project will be associated to a release, because only in the release you make the actual implementation and testing. So this is exactly how you differentiate change from release and projects from release. So I hope this helps you. But again, as and when you are going to get right into the release, that is exactly where you're going to have all these questions. And again, it might look and written in configuration between change and release, but as and when you keep discussing, or as and when we do a brainstorming of what is required, that gives us a lot more space to set processes right from the beginning. So this distinction between change release and project release, I hope you were able to understand the core idea behind it.
I think so. Do I need a change to create the release, or can I create just the release? I think the question is.
So again, the release,
I think,
can
do you need
be
change to be connected to the, I think that's the question. Like, do you need a change to connect to the release, or can I just create the release without the change?
According to the tool, you can create the release even without the change, but according to the process, you need to have a supporting verified documentation stating that this release is a valid release, or this process implementation that you're doing is a valid one. So according to the tool, yes, you could create a new release just by itself. Maybe something that does not have a change dependency. It's just a process definition that you want to do. Yes, you can just go about releasing the new process. You can do sequential testing using the different stages just to make sure the process is not causing a huge hindrance. And you can just go with the final deployment using the release stages. So certain process, which is just going to be a behavioral change where you slowly deploy to smaller crowds and then go for the entire organization. Yes, you can directly go through the release. And again, if it is going to require approvals, if it's going to require testing of downtime and so on, that has to be done through the change management first and then tag it to the release, which would be an ideal and an effective way of getting the release management and the change management processes right. So this is about existence of a release by itself, or why does it require a change to exist in order for the release to happen. So this is the answer for that.
I got another question. What happens to the changes in the release when the release is closed?
All right, so this is a good question. Now, the change is created, it's in the deployment, it's in the implementation stage, and then we package it to the release. All right, so let's take a look at the release closure rules. Now, what we do over here is that when you close a release, all right, or when you're moving the release from one stage to the other, we just have closing rules that mandate, that validates different conditions of each and every stage. All right, so what we do is that we verify if the data of these stages are completed in order for the release to move from one stage to the other. Now, in the release, we only validate the tasks that is on different stages to be completed. If the tasks are not completed, the release cannot be completed moving further. So the task validation happens at different stages. So it's only the task that's been considered over here. When it comes to the change has already been deployed, implemented, tested, reviewed, and only then it goes to the release management process at the implementation stage. So basically, you go ahead and associate the changes from the release. All right, so that's what we do. Or so as you could see here, it's not about creating a release from the change, it's about associating the release from the change. So the change has to be completed, and only then you associate it over there. So closure of a release for each and every stage will only validate the fields of that particular stage and the tasks of that particular stage. It does not validate the completion of a change in any stage. So the change has to be completed separately, and the release would be taken care in a separate thread. And again, if there's any discrepancy, we create a change and then associate it back to the release for addressing that particular issue. So that is how it works. So change has to be completed separately and the release separately. But if you look into the closing rules of change and release, the tasks is the key player, because tasks is where you delegate the work between different users, different teams. You have a dependency that's been laid out. So based on the tasks is where the completion happens. So task would be the key validator on change and release closure rules to be validated.
Cool. I also got a question, is there an API for release?
APIs, okay, let's check it out. Now, we'll go to the admin. So API is something that we keep enhancing every time. So if you wanted to look for an API, you just go to the admin and API, and you have APIs for almost all the IT service management modules. And here we have APIs for the release. So for different segments of the release, we have APIs for the same. The important thing is that if you are using any APIs which are of like older version, I would strongly recommend you to go switch over to the V3 model, because we had APIs for V1 and V2, and we finally changed it to V3. So that's one important update that you should be noticing if you're using any APIs, that it should be on V3. So this is a V3 API even for the release management that we have released. And not just that, since we are talking about APIs as well, we do have extensive reports that is available. All right, so in ServiceDesk Plus, we have a series of reports that is out of the box. All right, so these are reports that you could use for different operations. So also you can go ahead and build new custom reports. All right, and we again have all the modules that we have listed over here. Now let me check. So we have reports for different releases. So we have packaged a couple of release-based reports that you could make use of. We also have space to work on the query-based reporting as well in ServiceDesk.
And then it comes a follow-up question. We use Analytics Plus for reporting. Is there also reports predefined in Analytics Plus? I don't know if you can answer that. We can check it up and send you an email. But
yeah,
you know,
so since it's quite a new module, I'm not sure if Analytics Plus already supports this. We need to check. But as far as I know, I don't think we have it yet. But I can check and I can let you know.
Okay, that's cool. That's fine. I think that was pretty much all the questions we got and have. You described it so well, so.
Thank you. Now, one clear information I want to share with everyone is that this release management process is kind of like a continuation of all the IT service management modules, which unites or which constitutes to different IT processes and practices. Now, most of the organizations out there might not be needing the release management process, But again, if you have any questions, you want to have any clarification, or you want us to help you with any announcements or discussions, please let us know. We'll be more than happy to like schedule a call, discuss what your process is, and we can like learn and understand how it could be fit in, how we could fit this into your regular release management process. So we are more than happy to like welcome any calls, any discussions on this. So that way we could make sure we start implementing the processes right from the beginning.
Cool. Amazing, Santos. Thank you so much for your time. And as I said, this is recorded. Hope we can send out the emails pretty soon. Thank you guys for taking the time off. Please let us know if you want any other type of online training, or as Santos said, if you have any specific question, if you need anything cleared out. It's always, you know, a little bit, you know, your organization, and sometimes we need to dig deeper and to see what fits your organization when it comes to release or change or whatever it is. This will be, you know, briefly and some examples where you can use it, like a general training. I hope you guys found it useful, and I think we'll leave it here, right, Santos?
Yep, exactly. And again, we welcome any questions anytime. So I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining the webinar.
Thank you, guys. Take care and see you later. Bye-bye, everyone.